You have been lied to. Every movie, every love song, every broken promise, they all whispered the same illusion, that men crave love as deeply as they claim to fear losing it. But that is not the truth, because beneath his calm voice and confident stare, there is a wound that he will never admit exists, a wound that keeps him circling the same emotional trap over and over again. You think he moved on? He thinks he is in control, but he is trapped. Trapped in a pattern older than his name, older than love itself. Sigmund Freud once said, "Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways, and that is the story of men. From the moment he learns to walk, he learns to hide. When he cries, he is told to be strong. When he hurts, he is told to man up. When he loves, he is told not to need. So he buries everything that makes him human, his fear, his longing, his desire to be seen, and what grows in its place is not strength, but armor that hardens with every disappointment. By the time he meets you, he is already a fortress built on silence. He wants to feel, but he no longer remembers how to surrender. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster." That is what happens to men. In their war to appear strong, they become prisoners of their own strength. They mistake control for power. They mistake detachment for wisdom. They mistake your love for a threat to their self-image. And so when you give him warmth, he steps back into the cold. When you show him softness, he hides behind indifference. Because deep down, he does not fear losing you. He fears losing himself. This is the emotional trap. Every man falls into it, whether he knows it or not. It begins with the illusion of control. He tells himself he is choosing strength over emotion. But control is only a disguise for fear. He falls in love, yes, but love awakens the very parts of him he buried to survive. The little boy who was told not to cry. The teenager who was mocked for feeling too much. The man who was taught that vulnerability means weakness, so when you touch that part of him, you are not just touching his heart. You are touching every wound he has ever hidden. That is why he suddenly changes. That is why he withdraws when everything seems perfect. That is why he builds walls when you try to build bridges. He thinks he is protecting himself, but in truth he is suffocating his own capacity to love, and yet he cannot escape it, because the male psyche is addicted to the very thing it denies. He craves what he fears. He desires what he cannot control. Have you ever noticed how some men only chase what rejects them? How they lose interest the moment you start giving back? That is not arrogance. That is programming. From evolution to society, men were conditioned to earn value, not receive it. So when you freely give him love, his unconscious mind whispers, "This must not be real," and when you pull away, his instincts scream, "This must be mine." That is the loop, the emotional trap. A cycle between craving connection and running from it. Every man lives it. Few ever escape it, and you feel the weight of it. You start questioning yourself. You wonder what changed. Why did his eyes go distant? Why does he look at you like he is somewhere else? But it is not about you. It was never about you. You became the mirror he could not bear to face. When he looked at you, he saw everything he had suppressed, his need, his weakness, his humanity. And that terrified him, because for a man raised on emotional starvation, intimacy feels like drowning. So he pulls away to breathe. Not because he stopped loving you, but because love forces him to confront what he has avoided all his life. And yet, you suffer. You mistake his distance for rejection. You take his silence as proof that you are not enough, but you were never the problem. You were the catalyst. You awakened the part of him that no one dared to touch. And when he could not handle it, he called it confusion. He called it timing. He called it needing space. But what he really meant was, "I am not ready to feel this deeply." But here is the darkest part. He does not even realize it. He convinces himself he is making rational choices. He tells his friends he just was not feeling it anymore. He believes the story his ego writes because the truth would shatter him. The truth that every time he runs, he loses another piece of his ability to love. He becomes numb, emotionally amputated, and the irony? He will spend years chasing the very feeling he destroyed. He will scroll through memories, revisit your name in silence, and wonder why no one else ever made him feel that alive again, because deep down, he knows he felt something real. But he was too afraid to stay long enough to understand it, That is the real tragedy of men. They mistake intensity for danger and comfort for boredom. They confuse peace with indifference, because chaos is the only language their hearts understand. And by the time they realize the difference, the woman who could have saved them has already learned to save herself. But this is not where the story ends, because awareness is liberation. Once you see the pattern, you no longer have to play the role he projects onto you. You stop begging for closure. You stop chasing explanations. You stop trying to fix what was never yours to repair. You begin to see the power in your silence, the strength in your restraint, the dignity in walking away without burning yourself for someone else's light. And that is what terrifies him the most, because the moment you stop reacting, you break the loop. You no longer feed his fear of abandonment. You expose it. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." You were never his fate. You were his mirror, the reflection he was not ready to face. Now you know the truth. The emotional trap does not belong to you. It belongs to him. You were only caught in its gravity, until you learn to see it for what it is, a cycle, a fear, a shadow. And once you name the shadow, it loses its power, so you do not hate him. You do not pity him. You simply understand him. And that understanding, that calm, knowing silence, is what sets you free. Kierkegaard once wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Now you understand. You have seen what lies behind the mask. The truth men hide even from themselves. And once you see it, it cannot control you again, because love without blindness is power. And power born from truth is the one thing a man can never take away. Now you know why he falls, and why you never will again.